They say that the best stories are not written in ink, but are carved into the wind, into the silence of forgotten lands. They don't begin with an explanation. They begin with a promise to the listener. A promise of a mystery to be solved, a powerful emotion to be understood, or a great question about life itself. Our story today begins in just such a place. The train station had no name anymore. Sun-bleached signs hung crooked, and the wind howled through the broken windows of a station house long abandoned. Rusted rails cut through the scorched desert, stretching into an endless horizon of dust and silence. On a splintered bench, a woman sat alone. She was Eleanor. Her skin, pale and dry from the heat, looked translucent in the harsh afternoon light. Her hands trembled around a soft, faded blanket, impossibly small, still creased where it had once folded around a newborn's body. Only now, the blanket was empty. Her eyes were swollen and red, but dry. She had cried so much that no more tears would come. Her gaze was fixed on nothing, hollow and haunted. Beneath her blouse, her breasts ached, full of milk that would never be drunk. It was a cruel irony, to have the body of a mother but no child to feed. Then, the sound of footsteps crunching over gravel broke the stillness. She turned her head slowly. Out of the heat shimmer, a figure came, tall, unsteady, but with purpose. His long black hair was tangled and dust-covered. His clothes were worn, and in his arms, wrapped in a threadbare sling, was a wailing baby. He was Takari. His face, carved by sun and hardship, bore streaks of salt from sweat and old tears. He knelt before her, not with aggression, but with desperation. His eyes were lowered, his voice cracking. "Please," he said, barely more than a whisper. He needs milk." Eleanor blinked. The baby's scream was shrill and hollow, the sound of a hunger that had gone on too long. She looked down at her own chest, then at the man, and finally at the baby, whose lips moved instinctively, blindly searching. Her body tensed. Her heart pounded in confusion. Grief and instinct were at war within her. Her voice came out rough, raw from silence. Takari looked up at her now, and their eyes met. Two storms, both broken. His shame was visible, but so was his love for the child. "I can't feed him," he said, his voice shaking. "I've tried everything. He's dying." Eleanor swallowed hard, one hand still clutching the empty blanket. With the other, she moved to her blouse, hesitating for just a second. Then, she opened it. He turned his eyes away, honoring the moment. She took the baby gently from his arms. So light, too light. His skin was hot, his lips dry and cracked. She brought him close, and as soon as her breast touched his face, he latched. A soft, trembling gasp escaped her lips. Not pain, but something else. A release. The baby suckled hungrily, his tiny fingers curling against her skin. His cries stopped. Only the faint sounds of swallowing remained. Takari slowly lifted his head. She was looking down at the child, her eyes glistening now, not from despair, but from something warmer. She didn't speak, and neither did he, but something passed between them. Not words, not even thoughts, only a feeling, a sacred knowing. Two broken hearts, one child, and a bond born not from blood, but from grief and mercy. The wind had quieted, but inside the station, the silence spoke louder than thunder. The hush wrapped itself around the woman and the warrior as the baby fell into a milk-heavy sleep. For those fleeting minutes, Eleanor had felt whole again. The heaviness in her chest had softened, not just from the release of milk, but from something deeper. Takari sat beside her now, close but not too close. She spoke first, her voice quiet. "What's his name?" Takari turned toward her, hesitating. He has not been named yet. His mother. She was supposed to do that. A long pause settled between them. Eleanor looked down at the child nestled against her and whispered, almost to herself, "He shouldn't have to wait for love." Takari seemed to flinch, as if her words struck something raw inside him. "Do you have a name?" he asked gently. "Eleanor," she said. "But I haven't heard it out loud in weeks." He repeated it softly. "Eleanor." "Thank you, Eleanor." "I am Takari," he replied. She then invited him to share his story. "My wife," he began, "was strong, brave. But something went wrong. Too much blood. Not enough time." His hands clenched. She said, "Keep him alive, no matter what." Eleanor's throat tightened. "And you've been alone since then?" Takari nodded. "I left the village. I couldn't stay. Not without milk. Not with the elders whispering that a motherless child would bring him balance. They would have let him die." She asked, horrified. His silence was the only answer she needed. "I lost mine, too," she said quietly. "He was born early, so small. They wrapped him up and said there was nothing to be done. I begged them, but no one listened." Their eyes met again, and this time, the silence was a shared mourning. "He doesn't have a name yet," Eleanor said after a moment. May I call him something?" Takari nodded slowly. "Hope," she said. "I want to call him Hope." Takari repeated the name under his breath. "Hope." He looked at the child, then at Eleanor. "He will need that." As the desert air grew cold, they found shelter in a small cave Takari knew. As he built a fire, she asked the question that had been forming in her mind. "Do you think they'll come looking for you?" "They will," he said. His hands paused over the fire. "When they hear what happened." He explained, "In my tribe, feeding from outside the bloodline is forbidden. Especially from those not of our people." Realization dawned slowly on her face. "You mean, because I fed him?" He nodded. "They see milk as spirit. To them, your milk is foreign, tainted. They'll call him impure now." "And you?" she asked, her voice cold. "They'll say I let it happen. That I broke the sacred law. That I fed my son from the breast of the enemy." "I am not your enemy," she said, her mouth falling open. He looked at her then, with eyes that held the weight of 1,000 years of history. "I know that now." "So, what happens next?" she asked. Takari stared into the flames. "We wait tonight. Rest. Then tomorrow, we move. We must keep ahead of them." Eleanor didn't argue. As the baby stirred, she held him to her breast once more. She whispered, more to herself than to anyone, "If this is what they call impure, then they've forgotten what it means to be human." The desert wind had shifted, and Takari knew it meant they were coming. "How long?" Eleanor asked as they prepared to leave the cave at dawn. "Hours. Maybe less," he replied, scanning the distant ridgelines. "They move fast when they hunt. What will they do if they find us?" "They have orders," Takari said, his voice low and steady. "To bring me back in shame. To kill the child." Eleanor's body went still. "Kill him. He's just a baby." "To them, he is no longer of the blood," Takari explained. "They believe the milk of an outsider has corrupted him." "We have to go," she said, her voice firm. They began a grueling journey into the twisting gorges. The terrain was merciless, but Takari knew the route, and Eleanor followed without hesitation, even as her feet blistered and her breath burned. Hours later, Takari paused, reading the patterns in the dirt. "They are on horseback now," he said. 4 men. Warriors. That night, Huddled by a small fire in a hollow between two cliffs, Eleanor asked him, "Would you fight them? Your own brothers?" "I don't know," he answered honestly. "You don't have to stay," she said after a long silence. "They want the baby, not you." Takari shook his head. "I broke their law. My honor is gone. There is no home to return to." He looked at her. "What is a life without your child?" "Then we run," she said, her voice filled with new resolve. Together. The next 3 days blurred into one long exhale of survival. On the 5th morning, the signs were undeniable. "They're close," Takari said suddenly on a ridge. "Too close now." "I can't go faster," she said, her lips cracked. "I know. There's an old mining tunnel to the west," he said. "It cuts through the rock. If we reach it, they won't be able to follow on horseback." They ran. The last stretch was a brutal climb, loose gravel sliding beneath their feet. The baby began to cry, the sound echoing through the canyon. Behind them, the distant thunder of hooves began to rise. She dove into the jagged opening of the tunnel just as the first warrior crested the hill. Takari turned and saw them. The 4 riders of his tribe, their faces painted, their eyes cold. He disappeared into the tunnel, and the darkness swallowed them whole. They emerged from the tunnel high on a ridge, breathless and shaking. They had bought time, but not much. "They'll follow on foot now," Takari said. "I can't do this forever," Eleanor whispered, her body trembling with exhaustion. "You shouldn't have to," he said, his voice soft. He knelt beside her, his hand finding hers. "No. We do it together." In the distance, the sound of reckoning began to rise. Takari led them to a sacred place, a narrow pass between 2 high cliffs. "Here," he said, "we finish this." They didn't wait long. The 4 warriors appeared at the mouth of the pass. The oldest man, his face weathered like the stones around them, stepped forward. "You have dishonored our blood," one warrior hissed. "Your child is no longer one of us. He drank the milk of an enemy." Eleanor stepped forward, her eyes flashing with a fire they did not expect. "I am not your enemy," she said, her voice strong. "I fed him because he was dying. Because I wanted him to live." The oldest man spoke. "She would want him to be whole. Not tainted." "Then look at him," Eleanor said suddenly. She stepped forward, unfastening the wrap that held the baby to her chest. The shawl fell, her blouse hung open, her breast exposed as the child cried. "If you want to take what's left of my son," she said, her voice trembling with fury, "you'll have to kill me first." The wind went still. The baby's cry echoed between the stone walls. None of the warriors moved. Her eyes locked with the old man's. "I lost my child," she said. "He never drew a breath. But this one lived, and I gave him life again. If that makes me your enemy, then so be it." The old man took one step closer. He looked at her, then at the baby who now reached for her breast. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. "The child is fed," he said. "He is loved. That is more than many of ours can claim." One by one, the others followed. "You would let us go?" Takari asked, stunned. "No," the old man said. "You cannot come back. Not to the tribe. You are exiled. But we will not take the child's life." Takari lifted Eleanor and the baby, and they disappeared into the shadowed path beyond the sacred stones. And behind them, for the first time in generations, 4 warriors walked away from a command. They traveled for 2 more days, finally reaching a valley hidden behind a curtain of stone and sage. It was a settlement of outcasts and refugees from broken tribes. They were the Katama. An elder woman with eyes like melted gold met them. She looked at Eleanor, at the baby, and finally at Takari. He drank from your body, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Eleanor replied, her voice firm. He lived because of it. The woman gave a small nod. Then your body holds spirit. Come. You will sleep. And so began her work. The Katama took her and not as a stranger, but as a healer. Mothers who had lost their milk and orphans whose parents had vanished were placed in her arms. She fed them all. They began to call her Minatari, the mother flame. Takari, too, found his purpose, teaching the young and providing for the community. One night, under the open stars, with the boy held between them, Takari gave her a ring carved from bone. It is not gold, he said, but it is made with hands that chose you. Their ceremony was simple, surrounded by the fire and the people who had come to love them. They were survivors, lovers, and parents, forged in fire and grief. Eleanor watched him from the edge of a hill, a faint smile on her lips. She had lines now around her mouth and eyes, but none of them were bitter. They were proof of having lived and loved. Later, by a stream, her son sat beside her. Did I come from your belly? He asked suddenly. She chose her words with care. No, she said at last. You didn't grow in my belly. But I'm yours, right? She looked at him, his face sun-kissed and curious. Yes, she said. You're mine. From the moment I held you. From the moment you needed me. Then who's my real mother? Your first mother, she said, looking out over the water. She gave you life. She gave you your eyes, your breath. She's a part of you, and she always will be. He nodded. And you? I gave you milk. I gave you arms to sleep in. I gave you stories and songs and everything I could. I gave you my heart. He reached for her hand. I like that. She squeezed his fingers. Me too. He would grow older. He would travel beyond this valley. But every time someone asked him, who is your mother? He would answer without hesitation. The woman who saved me with love before she even knew my name. Some stories are born from blood. Others are born from something deeper. This one reminds us that family is not always defined by lineage, but by love, sacrifice, and the choices we make when no one else will. Thank you for listening.